Hello everyone, today we are here to discuss about human respiratory system. So firstly, what exactly human respiratory system and what is its role we have to know. Firstly, we know that respiration is an inevitable process for every living organism because it provides energy. Every activity of organism depends on energy. So definitely respiration is one of the important life process like digestion, circulation and excretion, and among all systems, respiratory system is one of the important system. So now we will talk about one by one which organs involved in respiration. So here in the diagram, if you watch in the diagram, here nasal passage and oral cavity and pharynx, larynx, trachae and lungs, a pair of lungs, and bronchi, this is called bronchi, and the diaphragm, and importantly, the most important part in respiration is alveoli. So you have seen a number of organs involved in respiration. So these are all together called organs of respiratory system. So each and every organ and its role now we will discuss. Firstly, nostrils. Nostrils, a pair of nostrils are present. These pair of nostrils are present above the mouth and below in the tip of the nose. A pair of nostrils, which are exactly the first organs involved in respiration. After that, above the nostrils, nasal cavity is present. That nasal cavity is separated by a septum. So the nasal chamber, which are lined by hair structures. Hairs, you know that hairs are involved in filtration of air. So this hair helps for the filtration of the bacteria and other pathogens. So it is one of the difference mechanism. Now after that, after nostrils and nasal chambers, now you can see here the pharynx. Pharynx is a common passage. It is a common passage for both windpipe and oesophagus. Because pharynx is a common passage both for windpipe and oesophagus. So firstly, the slit-like aperture, which is a part of pharynx, is called a glottis. Here are some terminology. We must know that the slit-like aperture, which is present in the pharynx, is called a glottis. Here, if you watch here, this is called epiglottis. This is called epiglottis. You know what is the role of epiglottis. Epiglottis is a structure, a flap-like structure, which stops or which covers during an individual swallowing food. What is the function of that? When it covers or blocks or it stops the windpipe, then the food will not enter into the windpipe. That is the function of epiglottis. After that, larynx. Larynx is an important organ in respiratory system for creating sound because the larynx is having a pair of vocal cords. So now we have to know about larynx. Larynx is having a pair of vocal cords. So what is the function of vocal cord? This is the most important. Vocal cords, it creates sound. How? During expiration, air will move, right? In that time, this air will vibrate. Air will vibrate the vocal cords. That creates sound. So, the sound box also another name for this larynx. But here we need to notice a point. Larynx is different in male and female at the time of adolescence age. Now we know about that. Exactly this in male, larynx in fact is longer and thick, whereas in female whereas in female, shorter and thin. So, as I mentioned here, longer means around 2.3 centimeters, whereas shorter means it's around 1.7 centimeters. So, this is a competitive point of view. These are important. So, another point, because of this structural difference, there is a difference in sound. In male there is a low pitch because of the structural difference, whereas in female it's a high pitch. This is one important point about larynx and its role in respiratory system. After that, the continuation of larynx become as a trachae. So the trachae, now you are noticing here, this is a trachae. This trachae, in fact, it is supported by C-shaped cartilage rings. Once again I repeat the same sentence. Trachae is an extension of larynx. It is supported by C-shaped cartilage rings. And in the point of competition, a competitive exam, another important point is trachae is made up of which type of cartilage? Trachae is made up of hyaline cartilage. Trachae is made up of hyaline cartilage. Cartilage is one type of connective tissue. We have, I think, in 9th class you must have heard about the tissues. In the tissues, we have 4 types. One is epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissue, and nervous tissue. In that, cartilage is also one type of connective tissue. In that cartilage, again, there are 3 types. That is the hyaline cartilage, fibrous cartilage, and elastic cartilage. So, this trachae is made up of hyaline cartilage. This is one important point in competitive exams. After that, now again if you watch very keenly, the trachae is bifurcated into 2 parts, that is called primary bronchi. I maximized here. If you watch here, this trachae is bifurcated into primary bronchi. This is called primary bronchi. Again, the primary bronchi bifurcated into secondary bronchi. Secondary bronchi bifurcated into tertiary bronchi. And after that, bronchioles also present. After that, bronchioles are present. At last, this is end up with alveoli sac. Each alveolar sac will have alveoli. If you watch here, this is after tertiary bronchi, the bronchioles are present. And after that, this is a alveoli duct. If you see this alveoli duct is actually terminated with alveolar sac. Each alveoli, this is called alveolar sac. Inside the alveolar sac, these are called alveoli. Which I have given here, alveolar structure. This is an alveoli and this is a capillary. We will talk about when it's a function. Okay. Now, here, one important point I would like to bring to your notice. Whether it is a primary or secondary or tertiary bronchi, every bronchi will have, in fact, cartilages rings. They have C-shaped cartilage rings. But this bronchioles does not have cartilage rings. That is one important point. And you hope you understood about the primary, tertiary, and secondary bronchi and bronchiole. And this is called alveolar duct. Must have seen here. This is called alveolar duct, and entire structure is called alveolar sac, and inside alveoli. Now this is the alveoli we will talk about now. What exactly alveoli we will talk about within short. But before that, this is the pair of lungs. If you talk about pair of lungs are in pinkish color, and a pair are present inside the thoracic cavity, because the lungs are protected by thoracic cavity. So if you watch here, the right lung receives the primary bronchi and left lung receives another primary bronchi. So lungs are covered by 2 layers. So one is, if you watch here, the greenish color, parietal pleura, and this bluish color internal one is called visceral pleura. So the lungs are covered by two layers. What is our external layer is called parietal pleura, internal layer is called visceral pleura. In between these two pleura there is a fluid. That fluid helps the lungs. Okay, it helps the lungs from damage or any harm. And so if you want to understand clearly, I will show here where exactly the fluid means. This is a outer layer and this is a outer layer and this is a inner layer of lungs. In between this is a fluid is present, that is called pleura fluid. That pleura fluid will help lungs from any damage. Now after that, as I told you, see, if you watch here in the inside the lungs, three lobes are present. Black color I have mentioned here, 1, 2 and 3. So this is the first lobe, second lobe and third lobe, right lung. Whereas in left lung, 1 and 2. One is upper one is called superior lobe. This is called superior lobe and this is called inferior lobe, and here also superior lobe. This is the inferior lobe. Okay, and the middle lobe also present in between superior and inferior. This is the third lobe, of course, right? Now, after that, the diaphragm. The diaphragm is present below the thoracic cavity. Below the thoracic cavity. Diaphragm is a muscular layer, muscular structure, and its importance is a lot in mammals because diaphragm is a special characteristic feature of mammals. It is present in mammals. It helps and it involves in breathing mechanism. What is the role of diaphragm means? Involves in breathing mechanism. Breathing mechanism. Breathing mechanism. After that, after diaphragm, I hope till here we are clear. Nostrils, nasal chambers, pharynx, larynx, trachae, lungs, diaphragm and bronchi. At last the alveoli is left. So here, why one question before we go for this alveoli. In fact, in lower organisms, respiration is helped by some other organs like such as skin, such as trachae, and sometimes interstitial organisms, lungs. Before that, skin is the organ. For example, if you take an amoeba, skin is helping for respiration. Such respiration is called cutaneous respiration. But in mammals, the lungs exactly replaced the skin. What is the reason? Here, one important point, we must know that skin, the diameter is 1.6 meters square. In fact, not diameter, the surface area. Skin surface area is 1.6 meters square, whereas the lungs diameter is, in fact, it is around, 80 meters square. You can understand how many times, 50 times it is larger than the skin. So, how exactly this much large surface area was created? Because of this alveoli. So, these are the alveoli, tiny structures present in lungs. The terminal part of the, bronchioles, alveoli ductae, if you watch. So, these alveoli maximize, enlarge the surface area of the lungs. So, successfully, the lungs replace the skin in respiratory system. So that is one answer for the question, how in lower organisms skin is a respiratory organ, in higher organisms how the lungs are occupied for respiration successfully. Okay, so that is one thing. So now we will know about what is exactly the function of alveoli and how it involves in respiration. If you watch here, the alveoli is having two types of sacs. If you watch the inner lining of alveoli, this is called type 1 pneumocytes. Type 1 pneumocytes. Whereas another one, this is called type 2 pneumocytes. Type 2 pneumocytes. What is the function? students, you have to understand one thing. Here, this is a alveoli, and this is a black color indicates capillary. This is a capillary. So now capillary means, you know, when the blood vessels such as arteries trying to enter into inside of the organs, it will branch, it will become branches. Those branches, the small structures called capillaries. These capillaries are flooded with blood. Okay, but here the capillaries here will have carbon dioxide filled blood because of the circulation. Okay, every cell will go for cellular respiration and it releases carbon dioxide and water. That CO2 has to go out of the body, out of the lungs. So here, these capillaries will have a lot of carbon dioxide. So this carbon dioxide tries to enter because here in alveoli, carbon dioxide percentage is less. Whereas oxygen is more because through the nostrils, oxygen enters in the lungs. So here oxygen rich environment, whereas in capillaries, carbon dioxide rich environment. So there is an exchange of gases takes place. You know that the statement, you know, air always moves from high concentration to low concentration. So here the carbon dioxide will tries to enter into the alveoli, whereas oxygen tries to enter into the capillaries. This is called exchange of gases. This exchange of gases is mediated by the cells called, you know, type 1 pneumocytes. Type 1 pneumocytes. So whereas what about the type 2 pneumocytes? Type 2 pneumocytes acts as a surfactants. Type 2 pneumocytes acts as surfactants. What exactly surfactants? Dear students, you have to understand surfactants means it reduces the surface tension. It reduces the surface tension. In fact, both type 1 and type 2 involves in respiration. In fact, that will help in the function of alveoli successfully. If any cell damages, if any cell get damaged, the alveoli fails to function. That leads to breathing problems. I hope it is clear to everybody. Each and every organ which involved in respiration